management, or sponsors.
Are you a family caregiver? Are you caregiving for someone who can no longer take care of themselves? Are you overwhelmed? This is Caregiver Solutions Info with Marcia Teal. Marcia will be hosting an hour of true stories and information, tips and updates of the latest research and necessary information in the caregiving field, focusing on you, the family caregiver. An Alzheimer's disease and dementia care expert, Marcia has 15 years of hands-on experience at Arden Courts, a leader in assisted living dementia communities here in the U.S. Marcia covers everything you need to know as a family caregiver, especially if you care for a loved one with Alzheimer's disease or other related dementia or chronic illness. If you have a friend or relative that is also a family caregiver, call them now. They won't want to miss a minute. And let them know they can watch on caregiversolutions.info. And they can listen on WNN 1470 AM in South Florida or nationally on the iHeartRadio app. Now, sit back, relax, and learn from our host, Marcia Teal, as she brings information to you that may just be the caregiving solution you need.
Good evening and welcome to the Caregiver Solution Info Show. I'm your host, Marcia Teal, and we have another wonderful program for you tonight. Well, COVID-19, the pandemic, it's starting to go in the right direction. People are getting their vaccinations, they're still being cautious, but we've all been cooped up for the last year in our homes. And if you're like a lot of people, maybe you haven't been eating right, you haven't been exercising, maybe not even sleeping well, not taking care of yourself in general. And now that we're starting to venture out a little bit, people are starting to wonder, how can I get back to the way it was? How can I get better? How can I feel better? How can I look better? How can I sleep better? How can I be better overall in my general health and have a quality of life for the long haul? Well, my two guests today have the answers to all that and more. It's very exciting. I'm so happy to be able to welcome Dr. and Mrs. Bernstein. Dr. David Bernstein and Melissa Bernstein are joining us from their offices over in the Clearwater, Florida area. Welcome, Dr. and Melissa Bernstein.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marcia.
Thank you. Great to be here.
I'm so glad that you're here. I want to let everybody know a little bit about you before we get started. Dr. David Bernstein, he is a graduate of Albany Medical College. He is board certified in not only geriatrician, but also internal medicine. He is more than he appears because he has been practicing for over 35 years, helping people, especially watching and helping people as they grow older. And of course, that's something that is going to happen to all of us. And so Dr. Bernstein has been in the field. He's been a leader in his field, doing the geriatrician and helping people all along. And he has a lot to say today, a little bit more about Dr. Bernstein. He also is an associate clinical professor in the Department of Medicine at the University of South Florida College of Medicine. And he is an author, a public speaker, and he talks on topics related to seniors, on health, on longevity, on wellness, and aging gracefully. And his wife, Melissa Bernstein, she's a graduate of Boston University, Sargent College, and she has over 35 years of clinician and consulting experience in geriatric rehabilitation. She, as an occupational therapist, she's also president and CEO of Dynamic Learning, Age Gracefully. She's also a publicist, a consultant, a food blogger, an accredited chef, and she has also received many awards for her work. So we are talking to the best of the best here tonight, and I'm so thankful that you all were able to join us. I'm very, very excited to have you both here. One of the things that you all have been busy doing in your spare time is authoring some books. And I know, Dr. Bernstein, I want to let everybody know that your first book, I love the title of it. It's called I've Got Some Good News and Some Bad News. You're Old. And these are tales of a geriatrician, what to expect in your 60s, 70s, 80s, and beyond, which was published in 2012. So in that book, you're talking about secrets to a happier life. You also had a second book about seniors and driving and the dilemmas and techniques to help seniors drive safely and maybe when to take that license away. I want to have you back on, and we're going to talk about those books because I think there's a lot of information there. But today, I want to focus on the newest book. And the newest book is called The Power of Five, The Ultimate Formula for Longevity and Remaining Youthful. Now, Dr. Bernstein, I'm really interested in this topic tonight for you to talk about that because this month, I'm actually having a milestone birthday. So I'm thinking about longevity and keeping youthful for the rest of my life. So I want to hear all these secrets. So Dr. Bernstein, why don't you tell us a little bit about the book and how it came to be and what is it all about?
Well, thanks for asking, Marcia. I started thinking about what the most frequent things I saw in my medical practice and what related to the most disease and death rates that I saw. So I saw cancer, cardiovascular disease, and neurodegenerative diseases. And neurodegenerative diseases include dementias and Parkinson's disease are the leading candidates there. And what I wanted to know was what was the unifying fact? What drew them together? What was similar between all of them? And my research led me to believe that inflammation was the key ingredient that causes cardiovascular disease, dementias, neurodegenerative disease, and cancers. So I wanted to understand what message I could give to my patients, what elements they could do to change their risk and reduce their risk. We don't live forever, but we can delay the disease and improve our lifespan and more importantly, our health span, how long we're healthy. So what were those things? Well, I'll tell you, as I digress a little bit, that I think people can really only remember 5 things. So I try with my acronyms and things that I put together to limit them to 5 things. I have 5 fingers on my hand. I have 5 senses that help me live. There were 5 members of my family when I was growing up. So 5 is a pretty convenient number for me. And so what were those 5 elements that trigger or lead to inflammation? Well, I discovered that sugar and sweets, carbohydrates, were a major contributor to what causes inflammation. And so is stress. And what I also found is that if we don't exercise enough and get enough sweat, that's a factor. And then there's getting enough sleep or not getting enough sleep is a factor. And the 5th item or the 5th number was socialization. So I came up with the 5 S's, and it's avoid stress, avoid sweets, get more sleep, sweat, and sex. Sex sells, so I wanted to make sure that was on the cover and that was in my logo and my algorithm and so forth. So those were the 5 things, and each of those items, and you can see my little pentagon here, each of those items can be addressed individually. And so I discovered in my reading, and it is no surprise, that Americans sleep really poorly. Probably 50% sleep poorly, and it seems as though 30% have sleep apnea. There's another contributor of insomnia that also does exist. So we need, as a culture and as a society, to improve how we sleep and how we address sleep. And it was a big problem for my patients coming in my practice. Another one was stress. We're a highly stressed society, and people are trying to multitask and do too much, and whether it's a pandemic or not, I think they're overworking and probably overeating in their homes, something you alluded to a little bit earlier. And also, again, whether or not there's a pandemic, we've lost some of our socialization. We need to have, we're a social animal, we're social, we should be a social society, but if we lose our interactions with family members because of people moving away or estrangement, and estrangement in families is a big problem in our society too. So there's socialization and sleep and stress, and I'm leaving one for last, sweat. In order to maintain our health, we need to exercise at least 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week. and find ways of making it fun. Certainly getting to 60 or 75 minutes a day would be even better, but we need to make time for that, and we need to incorporate it. There was a little known fact, or little known to me, fact about exercise. Number one, it's the best antidepressant that's ever been developed. And the second is it reduces the risk of cancer recurrence by 35%. So anybody who's had a breast cancer or lung cancer and they're getting chemotherapy, if they're not including exercise in their activities, they're leaving out, it's like leaving chips on the table in a poker game. You don't want to do that. You want to include all of that. And then the final thing, and where it, kind of dovetails in with what Melissa does with me, is sweets, sugars, carbohydrates. They're a huge contributor to inflammation in our body. And there's a growing belief that some of the neurodegenerative diseases are caused by inflammation. We know cardiovascular disease is caused by inflammation in our blood vessels, and so are some of the cancers. So I've endeavored to look for what are the eating habits, what are the lifestyle, because I won't use the word diet. I'll talk about lifestyle, eating lifestyle. What lifestyles are the most effective in reducing inflammation? Well, year after year, the Mediterranean diet wins out above all the other diets or lifestyles that people have. And so that's the diet or lifestyle that Melissa and I had been eating for a long period of time. And then about 5 years ago, we converted and eat a whole food plant-based diet now, which is very similar to a Mediterranean diet. We've eliminated a few other items. And we encourage in what we write about that people reduce the inflammatory components in their diet, and the Mediterranean way of doing that seems to be the best. If people want to take it a little bit further, eliminating animal products is another thing that can be incredibly effective.
Well, it sounds like the 5 items are totally interrelated. And what we talked about at the top of the show, people staying home, isolating, not socializing, they're not exercising as much. They're not getting that socialization. I don't know about the sex part, but definitely not the socialization. they're the sweat, you always talk about sweat equity, putting that sweat equity into it, and they're not getting out and maybe being able to go to the gym or doing the outdoor activities that they used to. And everything that you have in your book is the perfect answer for people that are now wanting to get out and wanting to do better and feel better after, we're being able to move around a little bit and hopefully getting their vaccinations and still being careful. But this is a way, and a lot of people are so confused by that because it sounds it's simple, but it's not simple, and it sounds like, okay, 5 things, I could do that, but it's more about like, how do I start? What do I do? And so that kind of segues in to the newest addition to the book, which is, I guess you call it like a journal, and it's a journal that goes along with the Power of 5 to help people make those goals and to attain those goals. So tell me a little bit about the journal.
Well, I want to add one thing before we get right into the journal, because there's one other thing that's really important about my 5 elements. And those same 5 elements reduce a person's risk for getting and dying from COVID. So when you reduce your body's inflammation, you've reduced and mitigated the chances of having a severe or morbid case of COVID. So there's another reason to add the icing on the cake to why someone should do a Power of 5 lifestyle.
Absolutely.
In answer to the other part of the question is that people have a difficulty starting and knowing, where's the starting point? Where do I start my diet? Where do I start my exercise? And we've discovered, and it's no secret, that journaling or keeping track of things is incredibly important. It's incredibly important to getting started. It's incredibly important to starting habits and developing habits and stacking habits one on top of another. So it may be that someone says, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change my eating. I'm just going to focus in on 5 days a week of eating healthy Mediterranean, and maybe on weekends I'll let it go. But I'll keep track of it. Okay, Second thing, I'm going to start exercising. Well, I live in Florida, it's too hot in the summer. I live in Minnesota, it's too cold in the winter. Find out ways of doing it inside a gym. I love to exercise, so it's not a chore for me to do it at all. In a busy practice, it was sometimes difficult to find the time. But even most recently, we've purchased a Peloton. So I don't have to interact with people in a health club. It's downstairs. There is no excuse for not using it. And then, it's one more thing that I'll keep track of. Okay, so here's what I'm doing with my eating. Here's what I'm doing with my exercise. And now there are different ways of keeping track of things like sleep. People can do it with their cell phones or their smartphones. They can do it with an Apple Watch. They can do it with a Fitbit. But it can track their sleep, and they should set a goal for 6.5 hours, 7 hours, or 7 to 8 hours is really the sweet spot for where people need to look for maximize their sleep. By the way, there's negative consequences if you sleep more than 9 hours a day. But 7 to 8 hours is going to be satisfactory, and there are ways of tracking it, many different ways. And then changing your time that you go to bed so that you get enough hours is incredibly important. And then there's stress. How do we deal with stress? What are the things that we can do, and what can we track within our journal that we're meditating? I've just started enhancing my meditation routine, and it really only takes 2, 3, 4 minutes where you're really going to start getting some benefits. It's not this 20 minutes twice a day, which would be ideal, but people don't have that. But if you can get your 3 to 5 minutes and take some 5 deep breaths in the morning and just relax before you start your day, it's incredibly invigorating and incredibly healthy. And then because sex sells, I put that on the cover, but it's really about socialization. And I want to digress for a minute with a very important point about all of this. And it's a word I like to interject, and it's called intention. All of these items, these 5 things, need to be done with intention. So it may be, okay, there's an intention, it's pretty obvious about how I'm going to eat and how I'm going to exercise and my sleep and my how I'm going to do my stress. But what about the socialization part? Well, that's another area that takes intention. I'm home during the pandemic. I'm going to get in touch with my high school friends. I'm going to Zoom with them. I'm going to make contact with my medical school friends when there's a reunion coming up, when I can't be with my friends during the pandemic or after the pandemic, to make sure to have social events with friends, because socialization reduces inflammation. It's a proven fact. And that you want to reduce your risk, just have some friends. But we may not be the friendliest people in the world. So I rely on Melissa sometimes, who's our social director. But intentionally make sure there's socialization in your life. And, admittedly, and Melissa will tell you, I'm a spoiled little boy, but being a practicing physician, I did have my socialization 5 days a week. But it still takes some additional work to incorporate other people in your lives. And that rounds out the 5 things. And you can see that they stack on top of one another. You can keep track of them in a journal like mine or any other journal where you're going to incorporate something you're doing to make your life better and longer. And
wow, that's really great. Yeah, it's really great. They kind of go together hand in hand, but you don't have to really do them in any particular order as long as you get them all in there. So I'm curious, Melissa, you collaborated with the doctor to make this journal and to prepare it. What was it about your background that brought your experience into this journal to make it become a reality?
Well, I've been an occupational therapist for over 40 some odd years. And in the ability in my career, it's all about really the power of 5. It's been the way that I've kind of lived my life. And even before I met Dr. B, and the importance of documenting, as Dr. B mentioned, of your goals and what are your goals in life, and documenting those goals in each of the areas of your life is extremely important and beneficial and helps you to keep track. So in my background, which, occupational therapy is all about helping people on all levels accomplish what they would like to do or what they can do when they've had some sort of illness or accident or something that has inhibited them. And that's what we do in terms of the activities of daily living: dressing, hygiene, feeding, self-care, socialization. All of that realm of occupational therapy is really the Power of Five. And that segment of the Power of Five in terms of the suites is really what launched us into the next thing we're going to talk about. But I have journaled for many years. Our children started journaling when they were young. Not all of them continued that, but we've always been mindful of how important it is to journal, and having a book in which to follow in terms of 5 different areas, it helps to kind of keep people organized and help to attain their goals easier.
Well,
So
that's
that-
so important. Yeah, it's so important to keep track because we
It
get
is.
lost. We did, gee, did I do, all the yoga I'm supposed to do this week? Or, you hadn't have a schedule. And people really haven't had schedules with the pandemic. They're
Right.
sort of like flailing around and not really, like you said, Dr. Bernstein, being intentional about it. And so this is a way, not only with the book, but then the journaling and the workbook and doing the goals. So I'm going to call you guys the dynamic duo because you've worked together and collaborated on this and came up with the perfect solution to help people. I mean, before the pandemic, during the pandemic, after the pandemic, it's a win-win, for everybody to do that. So I'm so glad to have you here. When we come back from our commercial break, we're going to be talking about the next part that has evolved from the Power of Five, which is very exciting. It's something of new, brand new, one of a kind out there. We're going to talk about that. So we're going to break to thank our national sponsor, and we will be back in just a few minutes, so stay tuned.
Feelings of depression, isolation, and frustration are common among persons living with Alzheimer's or related dementias. It's common among those who care for them, too. It takes a lot of patience and courage. It also takes knowing when you can no longer do it alone. At Arden Courts, memory care is all we do. Talk to us. We know. We understand. We can help. Don't let guilt keep you from making the right decision. Visit arden-courts.com. Arden Courts follows equal housing opportunity guidelines.
You are listening to your host, Marcia Teal, an Alzheimer's disease and dementia care expert on caregiversolutions.info. If you have a question or wish to share a story, call into the show at 888-565-1470 and talk with Marcia. Now, back to Caregiver Solutions.
I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Arden Courts Memory Care Community. They are the sponsor for this program, and Arden Courts is a leader in the field of memory care assisted living. As a matter of fact, they have about 50 memory care assisted livings throughout the United States, 10 of them right here in Florida. Arden Courts helps families when they're dealing and struggling, taking care of someone with dementia, and they can actually help take care of your loved one so that you can begin to be the husband again, the wife again, the adult child again, and getting that professional help can make all the difference in the world in your quality of life as well as your loved one's quality of life. So Arden Courts is a great resource, and today, just because you're watching this program, they would like to offer you this free educational resource. It's called the 36-Hour Day Book. It's a wonderful resource for caregivers. It's all about caregiving and all about dementia. It explains the different types of dementia. It explains the different challenges that caregivers go through and gives lots and lots of tips of how to get through those challenges. So if you don't have this book, I highly recommend that you get it because you won't regret it. All you have to do is send an email to delray@arden-courts.com. Again, that's Delray, DELRAY, at arden-courts.com. Tell them that you heard about this free book on the Caregiver Solution Info Show. Give them your name, address, and telephone number, and they'll be very happy to mail a copy right to you. So don't delay. Ask for your free book, because it's a great thing to have to look up something real quick that you need to know, or even to sit down and read it cover to cover if you have time. So it's a resource. Call Arden Courts for other information, and they're there for you. So today I'm so excited to have, I'm dubbing them the dynamic duo, Dr. David Bernstein and his wife Melissa Bernstein. Dr. Bernstein is a geriatrician, his wife Melissa is an occupational therapist. Together they have co-authored a workbook to go along with Dr. Bernstein's book called The Power of Five. And this book, it talks about how to have quality of life and have longevity throughout your life. So we're talking about having a better life. And if you have been really struggling during COVID and you want to get better, then you definitely want to check out Dr. Bernstein's book and get the journal that they have together collaborate on to help you meet those goals. But there's more, as they say on late night TV, there's more. Melissa, you have actually gone a step further after the Power of Five book to create something totally new and different. Why don't you tell me about that?
Yes. So one of the fifth suites is what sprouted. The Power of Five Test Kitchen is what we call it. The Power of Five Test Kitchen is where I do all my cooking and where I provide these healthy meals. And in the second part of Dr. B's book, there is a whole section on healthy recipes, which we put together, which was just kind of a basic weeks of recipes to kind of transition into a Mediterranean lifestyle. So from that kind of sprouted, okay, well, I'm cooking every day. I am a chef, and I do food blogging, and I've been posting recipes on our website under the Power of Five Test Kitchen. And I thought, I think it's time to do a cookbook. So I've been thinking about a cookbook. But more than that is talking with Arden Court and talking with the caregivers over the years that we've had a relationship. I thought, and my occupational therapy background, I thought, it would be really meaningful to have purposeful engagement through food and meal preparation. And how can I take what I'm doing in the kitchen and bring that to help caregivers bring their loved ones in the kitchen? Thus sprouted the event that we're having on May 5th, and then also sprouted the cookbook, which is a caregiver edition is what I'm calling it, which is a smaller version with a lot of pre and post information for caregivers to feel comfortable of bringing their loved ones into the kitchen and cooking simple recipes.
So Melissa, why would a caregiver who's taking care of a loved one that maybe has Alzheimer's disease or Parkinson's disease, why would they want to bring them into the kitchen in the first place to help? Because most caregivers are already stressed out. Wouldn't that cause more stress on them to bring another person?
Well, it could, but I think the way that I've structured the program is that they have to keep it very simple. They have to kind of think of it as another activity and food is so powerful and so brings memories, and it's a time for reminiscence, and you can talk through a recipe and help to stimulate some socialization as well as engagement. So you can have a simple recipe. It doesn't have to be a 5-course meal. It can be as simple as making salsa and chips. It can be as simple as we're actually going to be making quesadillas on 5/5. So it's the act of cooking, not necessarily the outcome. It's the process of getting them engaged in a step-by-step recipe that's simplified for them. And I've put together a skills checklist that a caregiver can use with their loved one or with the person in their care to get an idea of what is their skill level, what can they help with in the kitchen, and even if they can't help, just being there and talking with them and maybe having them stir something or just getting a minimal engagement is all beneficial for both the caregiver and the loved one. So I don't want it to be overwhelming to people. I want them to take this as a step-by-step kind of process. And depending on what level the individual with neurodegenerative disorders is, the skills checklist will help to determine the type of recipe that you might choose to do in the kitchen. Again, keeping it simple and breaking down the recipe in bite-sized pieces so that little by little the person can engage, maybe a lot, maybe a little, just depending. But the engagement part and the talking and the reminiscing about what they may have cooked years ago with their families, or what recipes might have stimulated some memories when they were young, all of that is very positive. So the benefits outweigh the fear.
Now, this is the first of its kind. I mean, there is no other cookbook for caregiving, is there?
I'm not aware of one. I'm not aware of one. And especially since, we have the information on the front end, which helps them, guides them, as well as at the end, there's lots of resources for them to use. For example, there are some adaptive equipment and some adaptive kitchen utensils that might be beneficial to have that person gain some independence in something. For example, if they can't grab hold of a spoon, there's a band that you can put on a utensil that just goes over their hand. So they could definitely, move some food around, or, circle in a bowl, just mix in a bowl. So there's ways that you can help people be independent with some adaptive equipment, and we talk about that as well. And there's a section in the back of the book that is a resource for them if there's some utensils that might be helpful.
Well, I have to share a little story with you. I was chatting with my sister earlier today and telling her that you all were going to be the guest on the show tonight. And she says, that is so good. She says, let me tell you, Marcia, she said, several years back, we have an elderly aunt, and she sort of was losing her eyesight, and she was getting dementia. And it was Easter, I believe the holiday was Easter. And my sister decided that she was going to call the caregiver in another state who was taking care of our aunt and say hello before she had her own social gathering. And when she called, they put my aunt on the phone, and she was probably well up into her 80s. And my sister said, "What are you doing, Aunt Ruby?" And she said, "Well, I'm stuffing eggs." And she says, "You are?" And my sister said that warmed her heart so much to be able to talk to our aunt, who was in the kitchen, because she was an excellent cook, throughout her whole entire life. She was an excellent cook. She loved to be in the kitchen, and she was actually helping prepare food for the meal. She was engaged. She was enjoying it, and she was talking about it and felt like she was productive. And my sister said that was like the best present she could have gotten, was to knowing that my aunt was doing that and was happy doing that. So I can really identify with what you're saying.
Yeah, it's so meaningful to do something in the kitchen. And again, it doesn't have to be something very complicated. It can be something very simple, like stuffing eggs. I mean, that's a perfect example of what is a very meaningful activity, because it's the socialization around what you're doing, and it's the power of food and conversation that helps of the engagement of the loved one in any type of activity in the kitchen.
And if you think about it, especially for caregivers who are caring for a loved one with dementia, a lot of times they say, no, you don't bother, no, you can't do this, and they talk about what they can't do instead of trying to find what they can do. And like you said, keep it simple. They can stir. They might not be able to measure the oil, but once you measure it in the measuring cup, they can pour that oil into the bowl, and then they can stir. So there's always something they can do. And it's amazing if you just stop to think about it, all the great benefits of that. But talk about what happens when someone might get frustrated. I mean, I'm sure that you address this because you don't want them to be frustrated, and you want to keep it simple.
That's a very good point. And it's very important to do the skills checklist to see what what are the levels that they can and cannot do, and what are their likes and dislikes in the kitchen. You want to make something they're going to like to enjoy to eat at the end. So that's one step forward. But again, one of the things that's important in cooking is that you have to be prepared and set up a mise en place, if you will, to set up all of the ingredients that you're going to use, pre-measure them, make it simple on yourself, and then, one step at a time. And if you find that they're frustrated, you may have to do part of the recipe and back off a little bit. If you see they're getting fatigued, you might have them sit at the counter rather than standing at the counter. So there's lots of functional adaptations that you can do in terms of positioning. And I also include that in terms of assistance levels in the book, because there are different levels to assist someone. It may be just standby assistance. It could be just verbal assistance. They may need to sit down. They can only stand for a certain amount of time. But again, you have to be in tune with their frustration level, and you do not want people to be frustrated. So if you see that someone's getting frustrated, you kind of back it up and say, okay, let's just take a break. Well, let's take a break. Let's talk about music. Let's talk about some recipes, or let's talk about cooking. Let's talk about other activities or other family kinds of things while they take a break, and then attempt again to get back to the recipe. So again, it shouldn't be rushed. You should take your time, of course, within the fatigue level of the person, because sometimes they get more fatigued and you have to kind of cut it short. But again, backing it up if they get frustrated, and then just starting again. Divert the conversation and then just start again.
Excellent advice. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be back with more. Stay tuned.
Okay.
Arden Courts is not just a place to live, it's a place to call home. Residential living combined with quality caregiving. This is the philosophy behind Arden Courts. Communities created exclusively for individuals with Alzheimer's disease and related dementia who would benefit from a safe and structured environment. For additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides, call 888-478-2410 to locate a community nearest you. Inquire about our educational seminars, resource library, or support groups, or simply feel free to ask questions you may have about Alzheimer's and related dementias. At Arden Courts, we know, we understand, and we can help, because memory care is all we do. Remember, call 888-478-2410 for additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides. You are listening to your host, Marcia Teal, an Alzheimer's disease and dementia care expert on caregiversolutions.info. If you have a question or wish to share a story, call into the show at 888-565-1470 and talk with Marcia. Now, back to Caregiver Solutions.
My special guest today is Dr. David Bernstein and his wife Melissa Bernstein, and we're talking about the Power of Five book, which has taken on many forms. The Power of Five that Dr. Bernstein wrote, 5 things that we can remember to do to be healthier and live a healthier life, and then the journal that goes along with it to help us attain our goals, and now a new cookbook for caregivers based on the Power of Five. So, question about your recipes, Melissa, about how many are in the book, and can you give me some examples of some of the recipes, and are they simple ingredients?
Yes. There's about 35 recipes in the cookbook, and then they're broken into subsections in terms of, starters and sides and meals. So there's, 5 in each, because I didn't want to overwhelm the caregiver thinking that there was just too many choices. So I picked the recipes that I thought were kind of easy to execute and could be broken down into bite-sized steps, no pun intended, to have success with it. So each of the recipes has options. So I call them Melissa's modifications. And because we are vegans, but we also know a lot of people are not vegans, they're vegetarians, they might have issues with gluten. They may be allergic to dairy. There's, you know, a lot of people who have different types of allergies to food. So what I do in the recipes is that one recipe may have multiple options. Now, I simplified it in the caregiver, but it just has under the Melissa's modifications, if you don't eat meat, you can do this and you can substitute with tofu, or you can, if you don't like tofu, you can substitute with chicken. So I give them options so that to keep it more focused on what the person's likes and dislikes are in terms of eating. So there are some very simple recipes, making a fruit salad. You know, you can even buy the containers of fruit that are already cut, and you can just have them spoon it out and put it in a bowl. I mean, it's as simple as that. Or you can have them cut the fruit. So that's an example of one of the recipes that I have in there. Also, we are going to make a few things. I don't want to really share that because I don't want to tell any secrets about what we're going to be doing in May, but trying to think of another recipe that's simple. Oh, we have actually Dr. Bernstein's, I believe I included that, Dr. Bernstein's trail mix, which is a healthy trail mix for your brain. So it's just combining a variety of nuts and seeds and dried fruits, and, you know, putting that all together and mixing it up, and, you know, voila, you've got a snack for throughout the day for them. So the recipes, I think, are geared towards not very difficult to prepare or to break down into pieces. I do break them down into when I talk about the instructions and the options in the instructions, but I've tried to keep them all very simple.
So because it's called the Power of Five Cookbook for Caregivers, obviously they're healthy based upon the sugar, the less sugar, like Dr. B
Right.
said. Sugar is bad, so I'm assuming everything's low sugar, maybe low carb, healthy
Yes.
grains. So it's a healthy cookbook for caregivers to interact with their loved ones. I love it. I mean, I think it's something that's going to be really beneficial to a lot of people. And you also mentioned that you're going to be giving a webinar coming up on May the 5th, 2021, next month. And you're going to be doing this webinar for Arden Courts. They're sponsoring you to talk about your book and to go through some of the steps that we've talked about here. So I want everybody to know about that because, I mean, you're going to be actually demonstrating. Can you tell us a little bit about what they will see if they tune into the webinar?
Yes, they will see. I will do an introduction about the importance of cooking with your loved one or a caregiver that may have just an individual with neurodegenerative disorders or dementia in their care. So it may not be a family member taking care of a dementia patient. And we're going to be talking about all the kind of preliminary things that are really important for them to consider before they start cooking in the kitchen. And then they're going to see a cooking demonstration with my very dear friend who does his disease, and she graciously agreed to be with me to cook. So we have a real live person as my talent working with me on preparing some recipes. And so I'm demonstrating positioning, I'm demonstrating some of the adaptive equipment, I'm demonstrating how to break down a recipe and how to prepare before you cook. And then we'll just summarize at the end of all of the resources and things that we have available. So the cookbook is kind of an after thing. It's really not about the cookbook. I mean, the cookbook kind of happened, but it's really about bringing your loved one or the person under your care in the kitchen and using this as an activity to really encourage engagement and really just something else to do with them that could really talk about memories and talk about cooking and really facilitate a really powerful event in their lives. So this event hopefully will encourage people to try it, and certainly I hope that it'll be beneficial if they don't get frustrated. The caregiver may be a little frustrated, and it may be a little daunting for them to start cooking in the kitchen with their loved one, but I think if they think it out and plan ahead, I think they can have a very successful meal preparation.
And on top of that, it's endorsed by a wonderful geriatrician.
That's very true. Yes, very true.
I want to let everybody know how they can tune in to that webinar. As we mentioned, it is May 5th, 2021, coming up next month. And it's called Cooking for Engagement and Socialization. And if you would like to join that webinar, if you want to watch it, be a part of it, it is a virtual webinar, but it's free online. Or if you have questions about that, I'm going to give you a telephone number that you can call to register or to sign up to watch this webinar on May the 5th. So get a pencil and write down this phone number. The number is 727-692-9117. Again, 727-692-9117. And you'll be talking to Bernadette. Bernadette is a representative of Arden Courts, and she is helping to coordinate this seminar, this webinar coming up on May 5th with Melissa Bernstein based upon the Power of 5 cookbook for caregivers. So you don't want to miss that. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be wonderful. And if someone can't perhaps join on that particular day, Melissa, but they're interested in learning more about what you do, they're interested in perhaps purchasing your book, can you give information about how somebody would go about doing that, please?
Sure. And, you know, if there, I believe we will have it available to kind of review afterwards. I'm not sure exactly where that will be located. Most likely it'll be a link on our website, but they can go to the Power of 5 Test Kitchen.com, which will take you right to our joint website, which is where my recipes are and where all of our information, Dr. Bernstein's blogs, etc. And we do have a store, an e-store available on there. And when the books are published, which is hopefully in the next couple weeks, they will be available for purchase there. They can also get them on Amazon directly. And the webinar also will, there'll be a live Q&A so that people can ask questions. So they'll be able to post them in the chat area for either Bernadette or Donna to read, so that we'll be doing a live Q&A, which will be really fun. And what else can I tell you? I think there will be, as I said, a link when the event is finished. I think Arden Court will also have it available on their website, but to be determined.
Okay, good job. I know that you work closely with Arden Courts in the past and have done seminars and things like that, but I want to give our viewers a little extra incentive right now. So if you're watching this on the website, caregiversolutions.info, maybe you're listening to the show on the iHeartRadio app under WNN, or maybe you're even listening on Southeast Florida radio station, and you're listening about the Power of 5, and you think that you'd love to have that book, you can get it free right now if you are the first person to call Bernadette on that number that I listed and tell her that you heard about it on the Caregiver Solution Info Show. So if you're the first one to call and speak to Bernadette and say, I want that book, and you get to her first, she'll be happy to mail it to you. So I'm going to give Bernadette's number one more time so you can write it down and give her a call. And that number is 727-692-9117. 727-692-9117. Bernadette will answer. If she doesn't, then leave her a message. Tell her that you're the first caller and you'd like to get that book, The Power of 5 Cookbook for Caregivers by Melissa Bernstein, right? And
Yes.
We're going to try to get everybody to tune in and watch your webinar. Doctor, I know that you have a lot more that you can share, and I want to ask you now, will you come on to another show in the future with Caregiver Solutions and talk about some of your other books that you've published?
I can't wait to come back and have another visit with you, Marcia. It would be a pleasure.
Well, I'm very excited that you both were with us today. Everybody, you want to tune in to the webinar, Cooking for Engagement and Socialization. Dr. B, since we're talking about how we can get books, maybe someone would like to read a couple of your books that we mentioned at the top of the show before you come on and talk about them. How can someone find out more about what you're doing and contact you?
Well, I'm glad you asked, Marcia. The best way to reach me is through my website. It would be davidbernsteinmd.com. And as Melissa said, we share the website, so it has an e-store on it. It has links to my books, which could take them to the store or to Amazon. And they're really great books. And I write blogs, and I address some caregiver issues. And my interests are they're like two different types of issues. It's the aging issues, and then there's the prevention of aging issues. So most of my what I write is directed at either older adults and how they can make the best of their lives, and how caregivers can help them choose retirement communities and make decisions and avoid problems. And then for younger people, what they can do, like with the Power of Five, to reduce the risks of getting older or getting older quicker. So, it's like a two-barreled gun. It's got two things that'll really be helpful. And it's davidbernsteinmd.com.
Wonderful.
And through there, a person could navigate to Melissa's site, which is the Power of Five Test Kitchen, or her food blogs. So it's an easy entry either
and
way.
They can sign up for Healthy Recipes if they want to get recipes downloaded. All they have to do is just put their name and address in the link provided, and they every week they'll get a new recipe in their mailbox, in their email box.
That's fun. New mail, new recipe, healthy. Dr. B, what age should somebody start doing the Power of Five?
I don't know, age 20 probably. It's a matter of addressing, do you have health related problems? Are you at risk for heart disease or dementia? Is that run in your family? Because if it does, the earlier you start, the better. From your experience that by the time someone's diagnosed with dementia, they've had their condition for 20 or 25 years, and it only shows up really late, which is a real problem in terms of how we were able to arrest and treat it and prevent this disease. So the best prevention that we have right now, and I don't call it prevention, the best way to reduce our risk is the Power of Five, because there's no pill, there's no medicine to do it. So I'm passionate about that. And when it comes to food, I am the recipient of everything that Melissa cooks. And not
You're
only
the
is
test in the test kitchen.
I'm the tester in the test kitchen. And the tests come out like 99% great. So I get a great meal almost every night, and it's different and it's unique, and it is flavorful, and it's got lots of fruits and vegetables. And
Thanks.
Since we don't eat red meat, we're just a plant-based diet, but even the modifications that anybody would make would be phenomenal.
Well, I'm going to have to close now. We're out of time, and I've got to go for my 4-mile walk to start my Power of Five. So we're going to sign off now. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. I truly enjoyed having you.
Been our
Thank you
pleasure.
very
Thank you
much.
all for tuning in. Thank you so much for tuning in to Caregiver Solutions. Join us next week, Tuesday, 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time for another great show. I hope you all have a wonderful night, and go do your Power of Five. Take care, everybody. Good evening.
Thanks for joining us for this week's Caregiver Solutions with Marcia Teal. Join us next week as Marcia, who has 15 years of Alzheimer's disease and dementia care experience, brings you more needed information to help with the care of your loved one. This show can be seen again on caregiversolutions.info, and questions can be left on the site, which may be used on the program to help others. See you next week for more